Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 13th meeting of the Pembroke School Committee. We'll call it to order at 7 p.m. Just a couple of reminders for the folks at home. This meeting is recorded mainly for our minutes, but it is also posted to our website, Titan TV on YouTube. And if you have questions in real time, you can send them to scinfo@pembroke12.org. We'll do our best to answer them as they come up. If we're beyond the issue, it's just a clarifying point. We'll respond after the meeting. If it's something critical, we will go back to the issue. But want to make sure that people have the ability to get questions to us while watching virtual. So being July 13th, there are no visitors. It's just us. Adjustments to the agenda, there are none at this point. Communications, there are none. And bill schedules have been circulated and were approved today. So first thing we'll hit is subcommittee reorganization. So I sent out the list yesterday. Erin corrected my error and added Pembroke Titans Against Drugs, the Social Justice Steering Committee, and the Legislative Agent. At this point, I just threw these out there. Nothing's set in stone, but want to have a discussion to make sure they meet with proper distribution of workload, one, meet with people's interests, two, and within the priorities were updated based on what we also discussed last meeting. So I want to make sure that the proposed members and priorities, if anybody has feedback, comments, anything.
No, I was happy with the assignments, honestly. I'm hoping everybody else is.
See how you haven't gone to a subcommittee meeting yet?
Yeah. I'll take whatever you can.
No, it's all good. No,
You are going to eat those words. I promise.
Try to balance it based upon what people ask for.
New excitement, don't quench it.
Absolutely, yeah. Just for the folks watching at home, negotiations does stay the same because we're in the middle of a negotiation. We can change it afterwards and try to balance, again, move people to different spots to learn, but also balance people on overall. And we did add within the priorities a couple of all the updates that people gave. So what we'll do is we'll approve this in 1 second. Then what I would ask is if somebody can take the lead and we'll get all of these scheduled at least once in the summer. We can do a virtual or non-virtual, however, organize and figure out how we hit on each of the items, prioritize what you think. There are a couple that are going to be more timely because of budget impacts and the such. As I look at this, obviously the CARES and ARA monies, which are in a couple, long-range planning, Hatch, and CPC, there's a time around that driven by town meeting. And then even as we look at the school start times, which is under education, that's going to have a budget impact. And it's also, so we're probably going to need to wrap that up in November, December to feed into the budget subcommittee so that we can then get it through all the groups that need to. Fair enough? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the subcommittees as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by David, second by Lance. Further discussion?
Are we gonna do
Yeah.
the PTAD, or are we gonna do that after the fact, adding to those three committees?
That's on, those are on.
Oh.
I mean, even though that's on the second page. Aaron added
Oh,
that
okay,
to
I'm
the second
sorry,
page.
okay, my bad.
Nope, you're fine. I just didn't add it to what I sent out, so. So PTAD would remain myself, been on that with Erin.
Yeah,
Um,
I turned 2 pages
Yep,
at once.
no, that's okay. Susie stays on Social Justice Steering Committee, and you are the legislative aide
Right.
again.
Perfect.
Okay, so on a motion by David, second by Lance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Perfect.
I'll start emailing to set up.
Yeah, everything doesn't have to be done in the next week or two, but just as we get through the
Got it.
rest of the summer. Okay. Okay, school committee goal work. Now, we have the goal document, my version at home. Does anybody have any comments on that at all? If you haven't had a chance to review it, no worries, we can hit it at the August meeting.
I didn't put it in the
Yeah,
packet.
it's fine.
Yep.
So let's do this. We'll do a walkthrough of it from top to bottom. If there are other changes, let me know. I will mark them up, continue to mark up the document, and then we'll review it and set it at the next meeting and approve it as the goals for the school year, because that'll be our last meeting, should be our last meeting before the school year starts. Fair enough? Okay. All right, superintendent's report, the closeout of the fiscal year.
Yay. So in your packet, I just recreated the materials that I had sent to you electronically, just updating for the fact that we have paid a handful of bills between when I sent them out on Friday and today. So there's about a $3,100 difference between the documents that you got in your packet and what's presented here tonight. Traditionally, I share with you our closeout memo that we also send to Town Hall. It gives you a breakout of the funds that we have from FY20 that are being returned directly to the town. They go to free cash. That this year is in the amount of $23,934.80. That comes from purchase orders that we encumbered from FY20 into 21 that weren't expended. So let's say we had a purchase order for Staples for $1,000. The item came in for $900. $100 sits on that purchase order. We can't do anything with it because it was from the year before. It sits there for the year, and then as we close out this year, it goes back over to the town as free cash. So we had about just under $24,000 in purchase orders, as well as payroll. So there's a couple of, if we budgeted, let's say 20 hours for a summer work project and it came in at 18, there's some overage there. So that goes directly back to the town in the form of free cash. In addition, you have a copy of the final FY21 budget with a line-by-line detail. So this is our first full year using Munis as our accounting system. So it's a little bit of a learning curve for everybody, myself included. I do assure you that the names of the accounts are derived from the DESE chart of accounts, but there is a maximum number of characters that we're able to use. There's lots of lines with the words S&M on them. That is supplies and materials. So if you have any questions about what the account descriptions are, please let me know. I'm happy to kind of, expand on what our lingo is here. Also for FY21, you'll see that there is a budget reserve line, which we'll talk probably at length about in a minute. But what we do each year is encumber our funds that we have left for FY21 purchase orders in our summer payrolls. So our payrolls that take place on July 20th, August 3rd, and August 17th. So those two things together are $3,064,469.20. That leaves us in a place where this is my 11th close here, we have never been before, where we have remaining funds in FY21 of substance. So generally, I think the most we've ever given back has been about, I think one year we gave back $14,000. That was just a bad year for us. But this year we have $376,257.30 left. Some of the reasoning being operational efficiencies associated with operating in a pandemic. Again, we did not run our school buses on Mondays, so there's some savings associated with that. We had a number of families that chose for our special education students to transport them themselves instead of the traditional van usage. And as a district, I think we were pretty fiscally responsible when it came to all of the opportunities out there for funding. So I'm going to share a couple of slides with you if it'll work. We're kind of far away. Maybe not. There we go. So our FY21 budget, $34.3 million. Our expenses, as I just said, leaves us with $376,257.30. So with those funds, there's an opportunity to think beyond this fiscal year. And what could we do with those funds to mitigate some of the liabilities that have come up for us in the past mid-school year, as well as some of the larger capital improvement projects that we all know have been on our radar, but are definitely one of those big ticket items that takes time to tick away at. So we talked on Friday at Budget Subcommittee about a special education stabilization fund. So there are a lot of school districts in Massachusetts that have this fund. It is a fund that is set up by the vote of town meeting. And then, again, the original deposit into the account would also be a vote at town meeting, and then the parameters on the account change a little bit once it's set up. But what it allows you to do is to create almost a savings account for special education tuitions and costs associated with transportation. So we would be able to kind of have a savings account out there similar to the townwide stabilization they have associated specifically for special education. Once the line is funded, it takes a vote of the school committee to add funds to that line. So in any upcoming budget year, if we had additional funds within our operating budget that we wanted to add to the account, we would be able to do that with a vote of this committee. And anytime we want to access those dollars for a cost that comes our way that was not planned for, it takes a vote of the school committee as well as the Board of Selectmen to expend funds from the account. So I think that shows there's a little bit more oversight to the account than just this committee, which is a little bit different than all of our other revolving accounts. Mary Beth and I met with the town manager following our budget subcommittee meeting on Friday, and his suggestion was increasing that number, maximizing what we put in the sped stabilization fund. He was comfortable with a number closer to $200,000 of those funds being earmarked for that. I did just leave it at the 150 for this presentation because that reflects the discussion that we had on Friday. Please keep in mind that $200,000 in a sped stabilization fund could be half of a year of a residential placement for one student. Those costs grow astronomically when we're talking about particular placements and students' needs for services. Again, I think that's probably something, once I finish, you guys will discuss whether or not you want to up the dollar amount or not. The other area where I believe we have some opportunity is HVAC. So there are 23 units on top of the high school. Many of them are existing to remain from our split from Silver Lake. We are often commended on our ability to keep 43-year-old rooftop units functioning, but it is not efficient in any way, shape, or form. We have 9 units here that are of more difficulty to us than the rest. So there are 9 that are between 40 and 43 years old. We replaced 1 2 summers ago. We have a town meeting vote to replace another one from a previous year, and then again on the capital project, on the capital plan this year, it was an additional unit for us to replace. So over 3 years, we've been able to replace 3 of the units, but there's a far greater need there. As we've talked about what the SR3 funds can and will look like, we've always known that there's a component associated with HVAC and air quality. We're still not, have not been given the allocations and how much of that funding will be earmarked for that, but this is an opportunity for us to almost set it up like a matching account. So if $300,000 is associated in SR3 for those funds, we as a town have money that we've earmarked to put aside for an economy of scale. It is obviously much more cost efficient when you have a crane here to take old units off, to take more off at a time and to replace them. It also is a more attractive way to bid it. So the larger the project, the more attention you get from some of the larger companies. And I do think that would be in our favor as far as driving down the cost. Replacing 1 unit at a time is not cost effective, but if we can get to a place where we're putting out an RFP to replace 4 or 5, it's a much more favorable project to put out there. So my recommendation is to earmark the dollars for a combination of sped stabilization as well as HVAC units, which I think the budget subcommittee was in favor of, our town manager was in favor of, and was very optimistic that the Board of Selectmen would feel the same way. The only caveat to that, obviously, whenever we're returning dollars to the town, we don't have the ability to say strictly what they're to be used for. It is still the will of town meeting. But going in, I think, with a thought-out project and timeline, I can't imagine somebody would be able to negate the need for a sped stabilization fund or to continue to chip away at the HVAC needs here at PHS.
Just a couple things on this. The HVAC units, as you can see, even though they've been on the capital plan, and the goal at different times was to replace 2, 3, 4 per year. Some years we weren't able to replace any because there was no capital funding in town. The other piece to it is, you know, if we're going to have the ability, some of the SR3 money is going to be able to, or we'll be able to purchase at least 1 unit, potentially 2. So if we can bundle everything up, we can go and, as Erin said, potentially get a better deal for all of them. The second piece to it, special education, prior to the pandemic hitting last year, we had a pretty significant shortfall because we had several special education move-ins, and we were battling with a several $100,000 deficit. As a result of what happened with going to fully remote, it changed the budget changed the complexion of our budget, so we were able to balance without major cuts. Having a fund like this, again, gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility going forward. One of the things that we've asked the legislators for, and we will ask again, is when a special education move-in occurs, the money should follow the student. Because as much as you think you benefit if a child leaves district and running out of district placement, we tend to never be on the positive side of that, or at least we haven't been few if any time since I've been here. So until something like that happens, we need this money so that we're not having to make either major cuts somewhere else, going to the town trying to solve it. When we were meeting with Jessica Bradley Rushing, and I think it was John Brown, probably every couple of weeks trying to figure out where we could come up with monies. So that's the intent of these two funds. Clearly, it's on us to prove to town meeting that would be the best place to spend it. So
One other thing just to point out with the Special Education Stabilization Fund is that it gives us flexibility in future years, not just for a move-in, but to creatively look at what we have available to us. So, we've all talked about, nobody's really sure what the needs of the students are going to be exactly as they return to us in the fall. That's, something that we've been grappling with this summer, and we'll continue to look at and work through it through the fall. But there is potential additional needs for services of our current students, not just to move in or move out. So having some flexibility on how to budget for tuitions and transportation in the future allows us a little bit more leeway within our operating budget to make some of the moves within district that we may need to make in the coming years.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about that on Friday. Good point.
So,
Questions?
correct me if I'm wrong, we had sort of tapped into special ed a little bit for the upcoming year to help cover the gap in the budget. So will this sort of help fill that?
We
or-
had put a placeholder in to potentially use some of our first quarter
Savings, right? Some of our savings,
circuit breaker
right?
No,
reimbursement.
circuit breaker
Circuit
reimbursement.
breaker
Circuit
reimbursement,
breaker.
So this could, if we got to that point, right? So I think we had earmarked, $45,000 from
Yeah.
circuit breaker. In the $35 million budget, there's usually about at least $45,000 of breakage over the course of the year. So the hope would be not to have to tap into that or to this to solve for that piece of the budget gap. But it is, it does give us another avenue also. There's no fiscal year on a sped stabilization fund. The circuit breaker does have fiscal
have
years
it,
associated with it. You have to use it you have 1 year after you receive it to use it. So we're always keeping in mind, as we did with some of the CARES fund and the SR money, when the expiration date is, so that we're spending it in the order in which it expires, making the most use of that money.
I think both components are really important because it shows that, one, we were good stewards with the funds that were given to us this year, right? So we're able to give back. And then we're also got some foresight to say, these are our needs. And this is where we know we can help support, because we're going to eventually probably have to ask for that down the road. So we're thinking about that now so that we can support and not have to put any more pressure on the town and help meet some of those needs. So
Right. I also put a slide in your packet that just shows all of the funding opportunities that we did take advantage of this year. I do want to just take a moment and say, Bill and Mike Buckley would kill me if I didn't. So the CARES funding through Plymouth County, we have talked a lot in the past year around what that reimbursement process has looked like and the lag in that timeline. So I urge, if you have any connection at the Plymouth County Commissioners, to call them and let them know that we have still not received the reimbursement from our December 31st request. So there's some concern around the timing of that. Though we're closing, potentially, our fiscal year tonight, the town does need to close in September, so that reimbursement needs to be booked in this year for them in order for it to have the benefit that it was meant to have for us.
So I talked to Commissioner Hanley last week, and he was under the impression that everything through March 31st had been paid, and they were going through the rest. He said if we just have to give him the
Yep.
detail.
I'm going to send you all the
If
spreadsheets.
you can send me the
of what's out there.
detail, then I can get it to Greg, and Greg can do what his work is. Because we were also talking about the SR3 money, and at this point, that looks like it's going to go to the county also. Plymouth, Bristol, and I think he said Norfolk. Unfortunately, my notes are in my desk at work, at home. So it's gonna go through the same process, and they think it's most effective and efficient. Beginning of September, they're going to have a workshop, which we could be on, anybody in, any elected official in Plymouth County can be a part of, to listen into what the rules are, because they were still getting the rules from the federal government on this. So similar to ESSER 1 and 2 in CARES, it's gonna still go through Plymouth County. So we will, have we'll still go through the same process, we just have to
Right,
wait a
and
little
the
bit of
ESSER
time.
money has more restrictions than the original
Yeah.
kind of floating of CARES money. So, you know, we've heard around, some of it needs to be associated with social emotional needs, some of it with HVAC, but very specific about the difference between supplementing your budget and supplanting. So not being able to take something that we're currently doing and ask for reimbursement for it. It has to be in response to the pandemic, something that is not normal course of business for you.
Aaron, tied to that, I do have a few questions. You're getting the guidelines on this ESSER money. Are any of these guidelines coordinating with what we're trying to do with potentially funding for SPED and for, you know, HVAC? Are there caps and all-inclusive caps, like, you know, you can't take more than 300,000 for X, Y, or Z? Do we have any type of things like that we have to look at that they could say, well, you're getting it through ESSER, so no, you can't use this money this year?
No, so the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 money really has a focus on learning loss. And so ESSER 1 focused on remote platforms and supporting students and staff through a remote platform. ESSER 2, based off of the timeline, is really earmarked for learning loss. ESSER 3 is the only one that has a specific HVAC component to it. And I don't think it's a not to exceed. I believe it's at least a minimum. You have to spend at least this much on HVAC and air quality in your district. I don't think you can't spend more than that number.
And there are no local level restrictions either. Like if we were to fund any of this, there wouldn't be a restriction on how much should it be
Right, the
approved by
only
town.
restriction, there is a restriction on sped stabilization. The most you can put in is 2% of your net school spending amount. So our net school spending amount hovers around 30 million. So we're talking about $600,000 in any one given year. If we have $600,000 left in a given year, then we probably should have been looking at it earlier and done something more impactful for a larger, you know, population of our students. So I don't anticipate us finding ourselves in that position, but that's the only stipulation as far as caps and maxes that we'd be looking at.
Thank you. And Mike already asked my other question, so. You always beat me to one.
Sorry.
Can I ask, how much is like one of those HVAC units anyways?
So you would think in 43 years that the technology associated with HVAC has come leaps and bounds. When we looked at replacing, so we have two units here, rooftop unit 10 and rooftop unit 13. 13 is the one that's right on top of us that was replaced 2 summers ago. We thought this is going to be great. We have 23 units. There's going to be these super efficient units that are going to replace the 23 with 12. It's going to be so cost effective and so efficient. Because of the way that the roofing membrane here is set up and the fact that we have a newer roofing membrane here, it was the recommendation, or really, I mean, the requirement of the engineer that you have to replace it with the exact same footprint of the unit you're taking off. So the units that we have here, the last time we replaced it was $107,000 for one unit to replace. So that cost in 2 years has probably gone up a little bit. Hopefully by the time we're replacing them, it comes back down a little bit. And again, being able to pair them as a larger project will drive that cost down.
So that includes like the crane to do it and everything.
Yeah.
So if you were theoretically doing 2, it would hopefully be.
It should drive it down, right?
Yeah, drive
the more
it
you're
down.
doing at a time.
I will say, the way the pipelines are, things right now. I
We
mean, we're
wouldn't
trying
be
to
able
get
to replace
things-
anything until next summer, right? So these are
Yeah.
projects that require shutting down all of the HVAC, and given all of the COVID guidelines out there with air, exchanges of air, I wouldn't be comfortable shutting down the units while students and staff are in the building. So it's really a, summer of 22 project, and hopefully we're replacing 5, which would be a great dent in what we have still left to do.
Now, the timing is good because if we find out a fall town meeting in October, then we can go out to bid in the first quarter and get on somebody's list. So we're not looking at this at the end of the summer. We're doing this at the beginning, because anytime you do anything late, if something shifts, you're impacting the potential start of school. So the timing works out very well, and we'll know by 2 days after town meeting how many units we're replacing, or how many we think we can, and then be able to write the bid docs based upon that. So, other questions or comments so far on any of this stuff at all? Okay, so what I'm gonna ask for is 2 motions. One is on the closeout, and then the second is to authorize Erin to submit town meeting articles for the fall, just so that we get that housekeeping.
Right, I did talk to Sabrina. The fall town meeting warrant will open the first week of August. It closes very quickly, but your August 17th meeting falls within the window. So we can have an opportunity to actually look at the language before I submit
But
it
yeah,
formally.
but, so, because we just don't want to get in a spot where we, even if we put in placeholders with the final detail coming later, we at least get in the 3, and then we can change the wording, similar to how we changed the wording on the capital item, because we were at the point, we weren't sure if we were getting the green communities grant or not, so we're just trying to give ourselves some flexibility. So the first motion is to return to the town of Pembroke $400,192.10 for fiscal year '21 to encumber, return to the town $400,192.10, of which $376,257.30 is from unspent monies in fiscal year '21, and $23,934.80 is for unexecuted purchase orders for fiscal year '20. Also to encumber $3,064,469.20 for fiscal year '21 invoices to be paid in fiscal year '22.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, motion by David, second by Susie. Any further discussions at all? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Okay, I'll put the second motion out there and see if anybody wants to make changes to it, because I want to make sure we get it right. So authorize the superintendent to submit up to 3 articles for the fall town meeting. The first is to establish a special education stabilization fund. The second is to transfer $250,000 to the special education stabilization fund. And the third is to purchase up to 2 HVAC units at the cost of $213,254. I think that should be it.
Just for clarification, 213 is the total cost, not
That's what
Two
we,
Right,
units
so
of
your
two.
numbers there add up to more than
I was gonna say that's
370.
more
Yes,
than-
wasn't it
that's more
200,
than
not
the gap.
250?
We'll take the extra money, but.
oh, shoot, 100, it was 150.
So we had 150, again, the town manager
Said
suggested we
200.
go up to
200.
2. If we go up to 2, that lowers your HVAC number that you wouldn't have necessarily set aside enough for 2 units. It would be more like 1.5.
Okay, sorry, so can we stick with the 150
Yeah, that's fine.
and the 213?
That's-
We can always change the 150 later.
Yeah, you have plenty of time to decide what those dollar
Right, and you
amounts are.
said once we establish the fund, we can add to it.
We could, you guys can vote
Based
over the
on
course
our
of a
vote.
fiscal year to add to it, and again, I think with all of the pots of money and opportunities for funding out there, similar to what we've done this year, I would expect kind of budget updates to be a pretty frequent occurrence as we get through the fall, so you should have a good idea of, whether we're finding any efficiencies in this current year that would allow us to add to that fund earlier than July 13th.
So the 3 articles, one to establish the special education stabilization fund, the second to transfer $150,000 to that fund, and then the third is to purchase 2 HVAC units for up to $213,254.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Sorry, I was going off of old numbers, we
Yeah,
changed
no,
numbers around.
that's why I knew it was something like
Yeah.
that.
I
number.
That's how we gain some money.
I knew it, yeah. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Beautiful.
So on that note, the select board will be having a series of budget meetings, the first couple of meetings that they're having in August. Bill has asked if we would be willing to attend one of those meetings and kind of talk to them about our plan moving forward. I think it's important that we keep reminding folks that we were in a really tight fiscal place before COVID, and that didn't go away just because we're getting an influx of one-time money. I think these 2 decisions that you've made tonight just show that we're trying to think multi-year about how to approach that problem, and that it didn't just go away, which is, I think, some of the fear as we started talking about the FY22 budget, because we had additional dollars, that the struggles that we have been having in years past still exist, and that we are putting aside dollars in the future to combat those.
Rather than just spending spending it as fast as it comes
Right,
in.
believe it or not, we
Try
could,
to-
Mary Beth, Jess, and I could spend $376 like nobody's business.
No, no, this is a responsible plan because it hits the capital need that we've been talking about for a long time, but it also gives us the ability to plan for the unknown around learning loss and also plan for, pardon me, the unknown of any other shifts in special education.
Sure, and we were able to accomplish, during some of the budget presentations, we talked about projectors and we talked about some consumables associated with learning. I think Brandon talked a little bit about some of the speakers here at the high school, and some of the sentiment was, can't you use some of the year-end money to do that? So we did look at all of those items that came up during the budget cycle and did, take care of those before we even talked about returning any money to the town.
And I think anybody really trying to do any home improvement or just buy wood is knowing that things are jacked up, and I don't know how quickly that's coming down. So thank you for thinking about this, because I'm afraid it may not be coming down. A little nervous.
Okay, all right, so it was on budget closeout. Anything else on this at all? Okay, so future meeting dates, we are set for August 17th?
Yeah.
So it's August 17th. We'll be dealing with goals at that meeting. You know, as we talk about future meeting dates, and I think we started to talk about September, can we put on the calendar when Natalie comes back, can we get this update from each of the subcommittee meetings each of the subcommittees at the second meeting in September? So we'll put each one of them on the agenda, just to give a quick 2-3 minute overview of what's been done, what are the plans, what are the obstacles, what do they need, and all that other stuff.
And
So
you said
some-
that's the second meeting in September?
Yeah, we'll go second meeting in September, because it'll give some time not only to organize, but then start to execute. Is that fair? Okay. Okay, is that it?
That's it, there's no questions in the mailbox. So.
Perfect. Okay, so it's 7:32. I'll take a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy for collective bargaining, personal services contract, and a potential legal matter, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the legal position of the school committee as declared by the chair. After which no further business will be conducted. So motion by David, second by...
Second.
Oh, wow, okay.
The working.
All right. So motion by David, second by Sue. Needs to be roll call. Sue?
Yes.
Lance?
Yes.
Susie?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
I'm yes. Thanks, everybody, for a short meeting. Enjoy the summer if we ever get one.
Good to be here.